Welcome to StopFake, the place where we debunk disinformation about Ukraine and set the record straight. I'm Lada Roslycka, an international security consultant, and I'm thrilled to be this week's presenter. Among the fakes we examine this week, Russian media distorts the meaning of a French Senate resolution on Russia sanctions. Russia claims that Ukrainian regions are demanding autonomy while the country launches federalization, and a human rights report is presented a scathing indictment of falling living standards in Ukraine. So let's get to the details. This week, Russia's news agency TASS reported that the French Senate passed a resolution calling for the gradual softening of sanctions imposed on Russia by the European Union. This decision was dictated by the desires of the French public who are against the EU sanctions, claims TASS. The actual resolution adopted by the French Upper House of Parliament is quite different from what TASS claims. The resolution is a recommendation that has no binding power, a request to the French government that will have no effect on the Russia sanctions. TASS quotes Senate member Yves Pozo-de-Borgo, who represents Paris for the centrist union, as saying how important relations with Russia are for France, while ignoring the rest of his statement, namely that France can become a guarantor of Ukraine's territorial integrity based on the Minsk agreements and a mediator in relations with Russia. TASS and other media reporting on this resolution also completely ignored an important section of the document, in which the French Senate condemned the occupation of Crimea and called the referendum on joining Russia invalid. In fact, the Senate's request to the government of France is nothing unique. A year ago, President François Hollande also said that he is ready to discuss the easing of sanctions if there is progress in resolving the war in Ukraine. The Senate is the upper house of the French Parliament, representing territorial communities. It is indirectly elected by elected officials. The Senate is less prominent than the lower house, the directly elected National Assembly, and generally receives less media coverage. Russian state-owned Rossiya 24 television channel broadcast a report claiming that 4 Ukrainian regions were demanding autonomy from Kyiv. The regions featured in the fake Rossiya 24 story are the western Ukrainian Khmelnytsky Oblast, Zhytomyr, and Kirovohrad Oblast in central Ukraine and the southern Odessa province. Rossiya 24's claims were quickly picked up by scores of other Russian media. In fact, none of the regions mentioned in the Russian television report are actually demanding autonomy. The issue in question is the decentralization of rule currently being discussed in Ukraine, aimed at reforming the division of power between the central government and regional councils. What the Khmelnytsky Oblast Council actually called for is reform of local government and for a clear division of powers between the cabinet of ministers and the regional council to be outlined in a contractual relationship. The resolution also calls for amendments to several laws. The text of the resolution was published on the Khmelnytsky Oblast Regional Council's website. However, in a few days it was mysteriously removed from the site. StopFake managed to save a screenshot. The Zhytomyr and Kirovohrad Oblast councils enacted similar resolutions. Earlier, the Odessa regional councils also passed such a declaration. Russian media have called all of these regional municipal reform initiatives calls for regional autonomy. Russia's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, announced last week that the process of federalization has begun in Ukraine. Call it what you want, decentralization, federalization, that's not important. What's important is that it has begun, Zakharova wrote on her Facebook page. Other Russian media quickly picked up Zakharova's claim and combined it with another fake that appeared in the newspaper Vzglyad that same day, claiming that the Odessa Regional Council asked Kyiv to enter into a contractual relationship with the port, distributing powers between the capital and the region. What the Odessa Oblast Council actually did was ask Kyiv to speed up the process of regional reform and to consider switching from a contractual relationship outlining the duties and responsibilities of local government and the central authorities. The Odessa body calls on Kyiv, together with regional councils, to prepare appropriate legislation outlining this relationship. Zakharova conveniently forgets to mention this. This is not the first fake that Russian media has disseminated about decentralization. Stories about fake autonomy demands in Transcarpathia surfaced earlier in April of this year. Earlier this week, scores of Russian media disseminated a TASS story claiming that the UN is concerned about the falling Ukrainian standard of living and insists that Ukraine provides social protection for its population. According to TASS, Ivan Shimonovich, the Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights, made these claims during a recent briefing. The data TASS refers to is part of the UN report on the human rights situation in Ukraine, 16 February to May 15, 2016, that Shimonovich presented in the beginning of June. The report describes the situation in eastern Ukraine, which, after 2 years of war, remains fragile and continues to have a major impact on human rights, especially for those living near the contact line and the territories controlled by armed groups. TASS has taken those sections of the UN report that describe the increasingly worsening situation in the occupied territories of Ukraine and presented them as a representative of the economic and human rights situation in the entire country. StopFake reached out to the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine for clarification and received confirmation that Ivan Shimonovich's presentation of the UN report was not about growing poverty in Ukraine, but about the need to enforce the Minsk agreements, which will allow respect for human rights and help to improve the quality of life in all of Ukraine. That's it for this week. Our video digest only presents a small amount of fakes we debunk every week. You can find much more dissected information on the StopFake website. Be vigilant, look out for fakes, and if you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, forward it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Lada Roslycka, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.